Hello and welcome to Think Like a Game Designer. I'm your host, Justin Gary. In this podcast, I'll be having conversations with brilliant game designers from across the industry with a goal of finding universal principles that anyone can apply in their creative life. You could find episodes and more at thinklikeagamedesigner.com. In today's episode, I speak with Ben Brode. This is probably the episode I have enjoyed the most, just from a pure laughing and entertainment standpoint. Ben, as you'll see, is quite the character and really a gregarious personality. Ben was one of the original designers of Hearthstone. I got the chance to work with him back in my old World of Warcraft TCG and World of Warcraft miniatures days. And now he is one of the founders of Second Dinner Games, and that has actually created the brand new Marvel Snap digital trading card game, and it's got a lot of really fascinating new mechanics. It's a very light, accessible game with some really interesting deep dive progressions, and we talk about what it takes to build these kinds of fascinating digital games that have depth but also have a level of accessibility and polish that really is unparalleled to anything else in the market, especially for those of you that have played Hearthstone. And you can actually play Marvel Snap right now at the time that this is going live. It has just released, and so there's a lot of really interesting insights. We talk about his origin story and what it's like to be a QA tester at Blizzard, and the skills that kind of helped him to progress along the path, and the ways that the design challenges kind of approach taking these complicated mechanics and simplifying them down, but making them more accessible and making them really great. So it's really fun. There's a lot of great stories in this podcast. There's a lot of great insights into that process of founding a company and building games and how you build something that can really stand the test of time. So I really hope that you guys enjoy this as much as I did. So without any further ado, I give you Ben Brode. Hello and welcome. I am here with Ben Brode. Ben, dude, it's so good to have you here.
It's awesome to be here.
Oh my God, we have a history that I'm excited to share, but like it has been years now since we've really gotten a chance to talk, especially deep diving on design. And you have been up to some very big things. I've recently played the beta of your brand new game from your company, Second Dinner, the Marvel Snap, which by the time this podcast comes out will be available for download, I'm assuming, on all the devices. Is that
yes, iOS, Android, and we have an early access on PC too.
Yeah. So all that stuff, I played it for purposes of research for this call, but as I was saying before we started talking, I ended up getting hooked for like 12 hours this last weekend. So I definitely recommend that people check it out, and we're going to talk a lot about some of the interesting design decisions and what it's like to start your own company and all that. But I always like to start at the beginning, right? You're a famous internet personality now and designer, and I want to know. I know your Blizzard story, but I don't know your pre-Blizzard story, or if we've talked about it, I've forgotten it. So I'd love to know what got you started in this crazy path that made you who you are today.
Well, so I always loved games, and I would make games on like my TI-82 calculator. That was kind of my my first game creation experience, and I would trade games with other people from my school and from other schools and stuff. And so I think
this is episode like 40 something on my podcast. You might just have had the nerdiest origin story of anybody so far.
There was an old website. I had to get like a link cable and upload my games to like TI-82apps.com or something.
Oh my God, that's great. That's great. I actually remember doing the same damn thing back then, but I had blocked it out. I had blocked that out of my mind. That's amazing. Okay, great. So wait, so you were programming the games yourself from scratch, or you were getting them?
I started downloading other people's games, then editing them, like optimizing them to make them faster and work better, and then I started making my own stuff.
How did you get the confidence to do that? You never programmed before that, or you did, and you then just found the calculator and went? Like, what? How old were you when this happened? Like,
I was curious. It was got to be like 10th grade or something, 9th grade or 10th grade or something. So
okay,
like 15 or 16. But yeah, it's not like it's not like high stakes. You just like, the code all exists. That's the thing about these old TI-82 games, is that you couldn't like encrypt them or anything. But if you got an app, you had all the source code for the app, so it was easy to like, mess with it and change the credits to say your name, even though you didn't make the app,
Yeah.
But I also was super into card games and board games. My dad was a huge collector of board games, and so he had like 1,000 board games in the year like 1990 or something. This is before board games were like as huge as they are today. And we used to have mandatory game nights. I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends. I had to stay home and play board games with the family. So,
wow. You would think you'd rebel and go away from game nights, but you got into it. It
exactly.
worked.
And
that's great.
We all played Magic. We used to do for anyone, if it was a birthday or it was like a holiday, my dad would get 6 booster packs for each person in the family. We would do like a birthday sealed deck tournament for everybody's birthday. My mom, my dad, my brothers, we all had we did sealed decks. So
see, this is a way better like origin story now. That see, I you don't understand. Like my aunt, when she for my birthday got me a Magic set. I mean, like a thing with tricks in it. Like you pull a rabbit out of a hat because she thought she heard I was into magic. So yeah, you were doing well.
So I also got really into then like modding. I did like Warcraft 2 maps and like StarCraft maps. And I got really into Duke Nukem 3D maps. And so I had this dream of being a level designer. But when I went to college, I joined this little crew of folks that was making cell phone games. This is in the year 2000, and they were making a massively multiplayer online text-based role-playing game for those Nokia phones. But like no one had internet on those things, so the potential audience was like incredibly small. And we didn't really do it. Was just mostly just messing around playing Warcraft 3 is all we did. And then one guy from that crew got a job at Blizzard on the night crew doing quality assurance. And I didn't realize it, but the school I went to, Blizzard was on that school's campus. It was on UCI campus. And so it was just like, within walking distance of me the whole time. I had no clue. So once he got that job there, I worked at a pizza place and he worked the night crew. So there wasn't that many places open that late. So he would call me and I would deliver the last pizzas out of there to Blizzard and get to meet all the people who were working the night crew. And that's kind of how I got my in and got started at Blizzard.
That is amazing. I love that. Just the pizza guy showing up. Hey, I can make games.
I'm up this late playing video games anyway. I can play games till 4 a.m. It's
right. Well, so okay. So this is like your story is probably the closest to the like cliche desire of everybody that's out there, right? Like this is. You're literally like you've got some job that whatever is paying the bills. You're doing some, and you play video games for fun. That's what you want to do, and you like walk into Blizzard's office. You're like, wait, you could just get paid to do this? Like,
yeah.
So that transition must have been awesome. But I want to dig into that role because the QA role sounds awesome, but there's a lot to it that I think people don't know, and I'd love to unpack a little bit of what is it like to make the transition. What does the QA role do? Like if people, because this is a common route for people to get into the game industry, right? That's a kind of a low level starting job at one of these companies. Like what does that look like? And how does somebody get that job and get other than delivering pizzas, I guess?
You can just apply for a QA job. It's unclear that delivering pizzas was gave me some massive advantage other than helping me realize that it is a job that exists and I could apply for it. So it is really fun. I really enjoyed QA. So I was a night crew. So we worked 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. And they don't have very many night crew QA jobs anymore. But I really felt like a detective. A lot of the time there's some bug or they know that they want some area of the game tested. You need to find bugs. And you're like, okay, what if I polymorph this unit and then eat it with a Kodo beast and then polymorph the Kodo beast? Like what happens when the polymorph expires? And like, aha, the game crashes. What's up? You didn't think of that, did you, programmer? And so it's kind of like you feel like a detective. You feel like you're doing like really interesting work. There are parts of QA that are quite repetitive. So sometimes they would give me a checklist, and they're like, okay, cast every spell in the game against every unit in the game. And you just make sure the graphics look correct. When the hit targets are all set up correctly. When I worked on World of Warcraft, I had to run into every building on every side to make sure the collision was set up correctly, so you didn't actually run through a wall, or you had to make sure you could get into every doorway as a Tauren because they had the largest collision boxes. So that stuff is not like the most mentally exciting work, but it was fun to be productive and create bugs and then watch those bugs get fixed. And it was also a really like, fun bonding experience hanging out with a bunch of other folks, working on the same stuff and figuring out how to do these test plans and stuff. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So how much of it is this like detective, what I guess breakdown of like, okay, let me think of something that they didn't think of and figure it out versus the kind of scripted, this is the test plan, run through it, run into every wall, do the thing.
It depends. It depends on the person because some people are better or worse at different kinds of QA tasks. At least that was how it was when I was doing it. And there's a lot more automation these days. So like, then there was literally zero automation. I think I made like a map to help me automate some of these things. I was the first person in QA to think about creating like an automated map to run the tests automatically. So now like there's a lot more QA engineers, there's a lot more QA automation, but there's still, you have to go through and, okay, this bug, the programmer says it was fixed. I got to, try and recreate the steps to do the bug. I verify that it was in fact fixed. And then, or send it back up and say, hey, this doesn't fix it the way you thought it was. So it's some of both.
Okay. And so you're going through this, this QA process. You've got your, in a sense, you've got your in the dream job, but what happens next? How do you move up there? I know you were doing some custom mods on your own, or like, how does that progression go?
I got really into, I like making maps, and they put me in charge of the map editor for the Warcraft 3 expansion on the Mac. So there was somebody else who was responsible for like the PC editor. And so I had to learn, I didn't know the editor for Warcraft 3. And so I had to learn it and then, test every feature of it. So in order to do that, I had to make a bunch of maps and really learn the tool. And so I started making a bunch of maps on my own time. I made a map called Worm War, which is like 12-player Snake that the folks who worked on Warcraft 3 liked enough that they turned into a map of the week at the time. And I got really into it. I made a ton of maps, and I thought, hey, I could be a level designer. And so I applied as a level designer on the StarCraft 2 team. And they said, look, we're going to hire 2 people, but we have 3 finalists, and you're finalist number 3. Sorry, you're not going to get the job. I was pretty bummed. And so I started working on like some more submission materials. So the next time the job opened up, I would have like a bunch of stuff to show that I could really do this job. But then a new opportunity came up, and I was at the time I was like, look, I've done a lot of QA. I want to try something new. And the job was taking screenshots of the Burning Crusade expansion for World of Warcraft and StarCraft Ghost, because the people who worked in the dev team were like, we're tired of spending all our time taking screenshots for magazines. And so that was my job, is taking screenshots of StarCraft Ghost and Burning Crusade. And
Wait, you're basically like a on-site photographer inside of
oh my God. Taking screenshots of StarCraft Ghost is the worst job, by the way. So you have to set up a multiplayer game, and everyone's like, okay, you stand over here and you fire now, like everybody shoot, and then you hit the screenshot button, and it actually because it's not like at the time like a normal TV is not high res enough for a magazine. So it renders the top left corner, then the top middle corner, then the top right corner. It does this 9 times and then stitches them together into a high-res screenshot. But it takes so long that the game lags and it disconnects everybody. So you get one shot to take a screenshot, and if the guy didn't fire when you said to fire, or like you didn't take the screenshot in time, you got to start all over from the beginning. So it was hours and hours of like setting up these screenshots. So anytime you see a screenshot of StarCraft Ghost in a magazine or whatever from way back in the day, it's likely I took that screenshot.
Wow. Okay. So these stories are great, just entertaining on their own. But I also like to pull out principles and things that people can leverage here. And one thing that's coming clear to me is your work ethic and tolerance for a lot of this grind seems exceptional.
Yeah, I'm known for this. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, we could do that, but someone's going to have to like manually enter all that data." And I'm like, "Yo, I'll do it." I actually love this kind of task. I love repetitive tasks because I get to zone out and. It's not glamorous, but I do enjoy it.
Yeah. Is there? Yeah. It is a superpower. I mean, it's like, and I think it's just one of those things for people that, if you finding the areas where you have strengths, right? Where something is fun for you that is painful for other people is the secret to like really finding great niches for yourself.
Yeah.
Like there's just, those skills are really, really important. So even if it's like, that's actually, it's been the secret for me as a CEO is like recognizing that that's out there. Like the parts of the job that I hate somebody else will love to do.
Yeah, right.
So I need to go find that person.
Exactly.
It
works in both directions.
job.
Yeah, you do the stuff you're really good at, and you find someone else who loves the stuff you hate, and it's a incredible partnership.
Yeah, super, super valuable. Okay, cool. So you're in. I didn't actually know that part of your story. I knew the rest of it. You're the StarCraft Ghost screenshot guy. I'm definitely going to go look some of these up, and I'll probably attach them to the email that comes with this when I promote this podcast. And then what happens next?
Well, so that department, creative development, was also responsible for licensed products, and so we found out that it was the role playing game books for World of Warcraft that when they've been sending them for approval, the art directors had just been looking at the pictures and not reading any of it and just approving it. And so we were like, oh, hey, well, hold on, let's just make sure that Blizzard's actually happy with these products, and that the lore lines up with the lore of what we're doing here. And so we started to grow our licensed product approvals process to make sure that when people submitted stuff, that we actually looked at it and reviewed it. And pretty soon after I got involved with the approving of the RPGs, that was when we got the pitch for the World of Warcraft trading card game. And obviously, as a huge card game nerd, is like my absolute dream come true. And that was my first taste of gaming and at Blizzard.
Right, and this is where we get to meet. Since I was working on the World of Warcraft trading card game team there, and at Upper Deck at the time, and we get to start working together, and soon thereafter on the World of Warcraft miniatures game.
Yes, and man, that was so much fun. I am so sad that minis game doesn't still exist, because it was awesome.
I'm so proud of that game, and we had so much fun working on it. I mean, to the finest details, and I want to dig into some of that process. But I ended up now I made a new minis game recently with Ascension Tactics, because I missed World of Warcraft game so much. I was like, I want to do another minis game. I gotta come back. So I actually just recently brought it back, because I was so much
awesome.
fun. I mean, TCGs are still card games are still like my heart and soul. That's the best. But I love minis games. You just can't replicate that feeling of looking across the board, having all these badass characters moving to each other's. Dude,
I still have all my old armies from the WoW minis game, man.
Oh, me too, buddy. We gotta get together in battle. I got them right here. I'm ready to go. I am ready. Okay, we got a new plan after this. Oh man. So I want to, it was, so when I, just kind of to reflect there, your enthusiasm and your just willingness to kind of dive deep on every feature of what was going on was something that really stood out to me. And we started working together. We just had the best time working through stuff. But I will say that the approvals process with Blizzard coming at it from the other side was very difficult. Yes. It was a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, we were a nightmare. Yeah, we were a nightmare.
Yeah. So, okay, well, I'm glad you said that, not me. And so, let's talk about that from purposes of, kind of learnings, right? So the things that went well or didn't, and how you think about, because right now you're making a Marvel game, right? So you're working on as a licensee, having to get approvals, and you've been on both sides of it. So maybe let's talk about what that looks like.
So much better than we were. It's incredible.
Oh my God. I don't know if Marvel's the same, because we did a TCG, we did the versus trading card game with Marvel, and Marvel was the easiest approvals process of all time. They were just here's all the stuff, go ahead, everything was fine. And then working with you guys, it was just oh my God, we just bashed our head against the wall. I remember, I don't know if it's worth sharing the story, but the one time our art director, I'll keep all the names out of it, but comes into the room with 6 different pieces that had all been rejected, and it's can you tell me what the latest one is? Can you tell me, how do you even know why these were rejected? Oh my God. So one of the lessons that we took away from that, and that I'm a big believer in, is brand Bibles, and having the ability to be very clear about what are the things that are important in the brand, what are the things that are non-negotiables, what are the assets and references.
We didn't have any of that stuff at that time.
Oh, I know. We had to make it for you.
Yeah,
we had to work with you to help make it happen, because we had nothing.
Yeah, there was no character turnarounds. How big is a gnome? I don't know. This is
play
World of Warcraft, I guess.
Yeah, we did. We had to make them for the minis. We had to make all of the different scales of everything and put them next to each other based on that. It was crazy. Oh God, I can't even. It's like these are some great memories in retrospect. I remember just bashing my head.
Nowadays, can you imagine how easy it is to work with them now that they have all that stuff? I'm sure they have like a super professional licensing stuff now.
Yeah,
but we were scrappy back then. We had to make.
You were starting that division, right? It was originally, it was literally like you were doing screenshots, and someone was like, "Hey, why don't we have someone actually some kind of process and approval system for our license things?" It was like, "Yeah, that's a great idea. It's a great idea." So there was a great, that was a great time and a great process, and I certainly learned a lot during that window of working on World of Warcraft, the World of Warcraft brands, and trying to make them come to life in these other forms, right? What makes this an authentic expression of World of Warcraft, but in a trading card game or in a miniatures game? How do you think about that sort of stuff now? Again, you can speak to it in terms of your Blizzard experience or the stuff you're doing. Like, what are the things you think are the recipe for success, or how do you approach these kinds of questions nowadays?
It's so interesting because so many of the things that I believed strongly in working on at least the World of Warcraft trading card game, I came to realize were just like wrong. We had this moment at the beginning. I remember somebody asked, "Hey, is it okay if armor blocks like nature damage? Because in World of Warcraft, you have to have nature resist for that. You can't use armor to block elemental damage." And I remember us thinking really hard about it. And there was a concept we were using called the ear flick system, which was like, hey, you're on a bus and the kid behind you on the bus like flicks your ear. At first, you're like, hey, come on. And then they keep flicking your ear, and eventually you freak out and just like you have a battle with the guy behind you flicking your ear. And so the concept was like one little difference is just an ear flick, but you have too many of these things, and it's just people are like, this isn't World of Warcraft, and they get upset. And I'm not sure I in hindsight believe the ear flick system. I think like players aren't like, wait a second, armor shouldn't block nature damage. It's like not a thing that pierces their consciousness. If you declare something with confidence and say, look, yeah, armor blocks all kinds of damage, that players are like, okay, yeah, anything you say, sir. It doesn't feel. I remember us thinking, is it okay if you can cast Bloodlust on totems because they don't have any blood? Isn't that weird? Nobody cares.
Yes. No, well, this is great because I think it's a really important thing when the way I look at it, you have to sort of capture the essence of the brand, the essence of the feeling when you're transitioning over.
Yes.
But especially when you're moving from something like a video game to a tabletop game, but even like, transitioning from, PC to mobile or whatever, like you need to simplify and you need to abstract out. Otherwise, you're going to lose people, right? You just can't. It's too much bookkeeping. It's too much challenge. And so a lot of those little things, right? Like, in Magic, you can put equipment on a snake and it's like, well, what the hell? Why is this snake holding a sword? It doesn't make any sense. What's going on? And like, and it's just like, all right, you know what? We're just going to let that slide because we need to, we need the game to function, right?
You don't have to, but if you want it to be very broad, you do. You need to, right. That's an important consideration.
Well, yeah, it's a trade-off of like the rules elegance versus the flavor kind of authenticity.
Yeah, right.
Versus, how much is it? How hard is it to onboard to this system?
Yep.
Do you have the different kinds of pains of like, okay, well, this is weird that a snake's holding a sword, but then another thing where like somebody just doesn't know that they can't use their equipment on their reptile, and it's like, oh, well, that was dumb, and now my cards don't work, and now I flip the table in a different right. There's all kinds of different things that you have to balance in these situations. So I find that really it's fun, like having worked on a variety of branded games for Marvel, DC, and World of Warcraft and a bunch of others. Like this process, it's always like an interesting thing compared to when you're starting and just doing your own thing.
At the beginning I was like, let's make it really authentic. And now I think like the stuff that's the most authentic, like the World of Warcraft board game is like a 6.5 hour board game, incredibly authentic World of Warcraft experience on a board game. That's the stuff I like the least, actually. I like the more abstracted stuff that gets right to the essence of the thing.
Yes. Right. Well, you have to answer the question, why am I playing this and not the original thing?
Exactly.
Right? Like if I want an authentic World of Warcraft experience, congratulations, go play World of Warcraft,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
But if I want something that's like a fun tabletop experience that had, inspired by World of Warcraft, feels kind of like World of Warcraft, that's great. And I think it just kind of like, I always talk about this kind of, you need to understand what the core emotional core of your product or your brand is, right? The core tension in a game or, emotional core. And if you can stay true to that, your audience will go with you very far in a variety of different directions. Right? If you lose that, then you're off and you got to fix it. But the details of, nature damage being blocked by armor and things like that is definitely, definitely a different space. So we got a chance to work together. We got to be able to really, dive into the licensee relationships. We got to bring the big things. I forget, did you come out with us when we went to China to do the minis inspections and the paint op stuff?
No, I didn't. I went to the TCG pack outs, but not the minis.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were literally like pouring over. I wasn't pouring over like, okay, do we need extra, dots of red on this shoulder pauldron, right? Because they have these red dots for the trolls, and if they don't have it, I'm like, dude, we can't afford it. We got to cut something. Like, come on, what are we doing? It was the most expensive pre-painted minis in history. I'm not kidding. They were the most expensive pre-painted minis in history because you got to have this extra red sigil on the back of the freaking pauldron. Okay, cool. Anyway, it was great. They're beautiful, and we should definitely battle. But all right, so let's fast forward then, because obviously, the World of Warcraft TCG was a key kind of starting point and inspiration towards what became the monster that is Hearthstone.
Yep.
And I'd love to hear the origin story of that and how you kind of got that ball rolling.
Sure. Before we go into that, I want to say I was thinking about the minis game just recently because I was I guess it wasn't that recent, but when Runeterra came out, because Andrew, right? Wasn't he like didn't he work on the minis game with you?
Yeah. Yip was on our team.
He was in charge of he was the design director on Runeterra, right? And I noticed that the templating that we argued so much about on the minis game showed up in Runeterra, the first person templating. Did you notice that?
Yes. Yes.
I wondered if Andrew was just like, I'm waiting. Someday I'm going to use this.
Yeah. Maybe explain a little bit to our audience what we're talking about.
So, like in normal card games, like it says Magic does this thing that I think is a mistake, but they say like lightning bolt deals 3 damage to target creature or whatever, and then Hearthstone just says deal 3 damage. But like you have to often write about things in third person, right? Like this card does this, right? Or do this thing. And we tried I think for like brevity of text, just using first person instead, saying I do this. I have, when I see this card, I gain flying or something like that. And it's much simpler, but for some reason, this was just like we had all out battles on this. This is the thing I remember most about the minis development was this particular topic.
Right. Yeah. So those were like personifying those characters, saying I deal, spend 4 ticks because we had a tick system, timing system, and everything was spent. I deal 5 magic damage to at range 3.
Yeah.
And,
right.
There's like, does that make sense? But it's templating. Man, we could talk forever about templating because I
love that topic. It's so important.
Yeah. It really is. It really is. And it's like, it's some of the nitty gritty stuff of design, because you have a lot of different factors that come into play, right? The version, or, even if you're just playing traditional card games, the version just says, I do this to this, right? It's as though you're reading it to your opponent, and there's something clean about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The targeting language and stuff for Magic can be very precise, but reads like complete jargon nonsense to newcomers, right? Like, that just, what the hell does that mean? And then the simpler versions that are much cleaner and more approachable, less scary, less verbose, they can leave a lot of open questions, right? So you're not sure. So, one of the things, like when it's a great things to contrast, because when you're dealing something like Hearthstone, like a digital game, you need a lot less precision, because the cards are just going to do what they're supposed to do. Yep. The rules engine's going to enforce itself. So simple
what's going to happen?
Way better.
Drag it out of your hand.
I don't know. Let me play it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Done. Right. So the burden is way more on concision and simplicity and like approachability versus completeness and, comprehensive kind of.
You're sitting around a table and the card doesn't make sense. You just have to stop playing, like it's just
right.
not.
Right. But a lot of these things are just conventions now. Like I find myself in this trap all the time. So for Soulforge Fusion, which will also have just released by the time this podcast comes out, so everybody can go check that out. Which is this sort of algorithmically generated card game I did with Richard Garfield. We went through a lot of these questions, and we got rid of the targeting concept. We just let deal 3 damage. You can figure it out. Deal 3 damage to a creature or whatever. Like you can figure it out. Like people know this stuff, but the drive, especially from my team, but a lot of the people who are our target audience, that their instincts have been trained by Magic. They expect certain kinds of terminology, even though if you have not played Magic, it's nonsense. It's an interesting trade-off now, where just the norms that have developed, people, do you cater to those, or do you try to do the thing that's more new player friendly? It's really fascinating.
Yeah, these are such interesting decisions to make when working on games. There's so many of these really small decisions that, like, together in aggregate make such a big difference.
Yeah, exactly. And you will spend, people do not realize how much time we spend on this stuff. So much time debating these things. Like, oh my God, refined templating meetings. And then, when you have to do comprehensive rules and you need everything to function, in your digital game, like, it has to function a certain specific way. And so I always try to, like, build even my tabletop games, like, okay, how would I make the rules for this so that I could program it so that it could actually have a digital part if I wanted.
Really important.
It just
really
forced
important.
You. Yeah.
Okay, so Hearthstone, how did that happen? So, we were working on, making a digital version of the World of Warcraft trading card game at the time, and we took the judge test, and the game director on Hearthstone, Eric Dodds, failed the judge test, really understandably, because the totem rules for the WoW TCG were horrendous. Because we're doing that thing where we're trying to match WoW, and we didn't want totems to be AoE-able, but we did want you to be able to target them with spells. And so they were like spell cards that had health that you could target like spells, but couldn't be chosen when it said choose a minion or something. It was super complicated. And so Eric Dodd said, "We will never make a game with these rules." And I was like, what does that even mean? There's like a whole team of people making the World of Warcraft trading card game over at Upper Deck. Like, how are we're just going to, like, not have the same totem rules? Like, the number one deck in the meta right now is a totems deck. I don't know what's happening. At the time, it was pretty scary for me to not kind of know where we were going to end up. But it was like really smart, I think, to realize, like, what the opportunity space was for card games, to just not have any rules that were like, I don't understand, how does this work? And just to, like, hey, let's make totems minions, right? Let's just make them like everything else. You can AoE them down, nobody cares. That was kind of the big
nature damage blocked by armor. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Nobody cares. And then the other big moment was I went to Gen Con and played a game called Battle Spirits. Did you ever play Battle Spirits?
It sounds familiar, but I do not remember it.
It was by Mike Elliott. So it's a.
No, I did. I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So it had a mana system that I had never seen before. You had literal blue mana crystals, and you got one every turn. And then when you played your cards, you actually like the mana crystal stayed on the cards, and then damage was also mana crystals. So if you took a damage, you got an extra mana crystal. If you hit your opponent 3 times, then you win. But the moment of, like, hey, I could just get a mana every turn. I don't have to shuffle these resources into my deck. We played the WoW TCG with mana crystals, and we just said, look, take all the quests out of your deck, because that was one of the resource types, and just play it like this. And we realized a couple things. One, the games were much faster, because the hardest decision you make is deciding which resource to put face down, which is like how resources work. You choose a card, put face down, it would become a resource in the WoW TCG. And we just got rid of the hardest and, like, least fun decision. So games were double the speed. And also the game still totally worked. All the fun decisions were still there. So you got to play, twice the number of games, and so you could make less decisions per game, but the games are twice as fast. So you could play 2 games at the time you got to play 1 game before. And we said, okay, look, we can make a card game that is much faster, much simpler than the WoW TCG. Instead of making the WoW TCG online, just make a new game. And that's kind of where. And then we took the rails off. We just kind of went crazy. We tried some crazy stuff. We tried, like really, really out there things where there was like castles that you had to blow down, and then like a hero would jump out of the castle or so. We tried a lot of different stuff, but that was kind of the genesis.
Yeah. Well, so it's such a powerful realization, right? This idea that like, look, we can just make things simpler and get to the essence of the fun faster, right? That there's so much baggage that comes with the assumptions of each. And it's the one thing I advise new designers at all the time is like, simple is better. Like always try to simplify. Like the default assumption of designers is always just, oh, I'll just add this other cool thing. And this is cool. And this is cool. And like, you need to get rid of things that are cool, that don't serve your core attention, that don't serve the things that the most fun, that get you out of the thing that's most important. And so
it was really interesting. We at the time, we took a lot of heat because Hearthstone was so much simpler. People were like, oh, this is just like Magic for babies. You know, like there's way less decisions per game. And I think people, at least at the time, didn't realize that it's not about the number of decisions per game. It's the density of decisions and how fun those decisions are to make. And so, you know, I could play a game of Hearthstone in 7 minutes, and it's just like hard to do that in a game of Magic. It takes much longer. So I am making more decisions per game, but like, am I making more decisions per minute? I'm not sure that I am. And that was like a thing that I think really served Hearthstone well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the value of like how you're targeting your market too, right? Like there's I think Hearthstone just captured this whole space of people for whom like, yeah, I don't have 20 minutes to play a game.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to learn all of these arcane rules for a system that wasn't designed to be native digital.
Yep.
And I want to be able to but I want to be able to have that fun. Like, is Hearthstone as deep as Magic? I don't think so. But it's plenty deep to people that want to get involved and get interest, get into it. And then it has all of these other advantages of just ease of onboarding and accessibility. And like, I mean, I know we were going through, it's like we built the original version of SoulForge back during the same time period, and we launched, and we were like, at the time when we were coming out, was like we were the first real kind of game that was trying to be like native digital TCG. And we were way simpler than Magic in a lot of ways, but we were way more complicated and clunky than Hearthstone. And that definitely, when Hearthstone came out, it just, it definitely dominated the space, and it was a really fascinating. I learned a lot very quickly from what is possible in polish and getting at the essence. The way you guys did the draft format of like being able to just pick from 3 cards, from 3 cards.
I think that's the biggest impact Hearthstone has had on the games industry is the arena mode. Both that the way you draft and also the format of win 9 before or 12 before you lose 3. So many games have picked up that like feeling of a run in that way, and that I don't think that was done before Hearthstone.
Yeah, no, I mean we straight copied that for sure. It was just better. It was just better. So explain them both in a little bit more detail, because not everybody that's listening will know what we're talking about.
So at the time we knew that drafting was just like one of the best experiences in card games, and so we tried to figure out how to do a draft, but like the normal draft experience.
And a draft is when you get the cards as part of the game experience, like you're opening up packs.
So everyone opens a pack. They take one card from the pack, pass the pack to their left, take another card, pass the pack to their left, and so on until you have a limited pool of cards that you build a deck from. So you don't get to choose from any card in the game. It's like it's called limited because you have a limited card pool. And in our experience drafting the WoW TCG or Magic, it takes like 4 hours. It's an hour to draft and 30 minutes of deck building, and then you got to play 3 rounds. So it's a long time to do a draft. It's a huge time commitment, but super fun. And so we said, can we do this? This was actually Hamilton's challenge to the team. He was the executive producer on Hearthstone. He's the CEO of Second Dinner, of the company where we started together. So he said, hey, can we do an asynchronous version of draft? And so one of the things we tried at first was we said, okay, we're going to tape up envelopes on the wall, and we'll number them like 15 to 1. And you can open a pack and take a card out and then swap it with the envelope that shows how many cards are left in the pack. And then you can just go down the wall, kind of swapping cards, like taking a card from each pack on the wall. And then you can, in that way, draft a pack. And then the person who comes behind you can draft the packs that you've picked from. And so you can kind of do we had like 3 sets of packs. You could do three packs at once. And so in that way, you could have a draft experience alone without anybody else there, and see packs that had been pre-picked by other players and kind of seeded by those players. And it was pretty fun. And we were like, hey, this works. This is like an asynchronous experience. You could do the draft whenever you want, and then maybe you could play against somebody who has the same record as you, at any time. That because it doesn't really matter about this. You lose some stuff about like signaling and some things that are people like from drafts, but you don't lose that much, and you still have that experience. And when we were doing that, we realized, there's still a couple things that could be better. The first is the very first pack you open is overwhelming. You have 15 options. You got to choose one. And there's a lot of implications, like which class am I going to go, or which colors am I going to go, and it's just hard to make that choice. And then at the end, there's no choices. They're like, okay, there's only one red card, so I take that. And there's only one red card, so I take that. And there's only one red card. It's just like not interesting anymore. And so we said, look, at what point do we find it the most fun? And we said, I think the most fun is when I have 3 or 4 choices. That's when I'm really enjoying myself. And so we said, what if we just curate this and show you 3 to 4 choices that are of your class? And so that's where we got the idea for Arena. And we prototyped it up, and it was super fun. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is way faster and like more fun moments, like less overwhelming and less auto picks, more just like interesting choices again and again.
Yep. No, that's right. It's just such a great insight, and it just speaks to the same core that we've been talking about this whole time, which is that, how do you get to the essence of the fun as quickly as possible and get out of the player's way with everything else? That's just the heart of really great, widely accessible game design, right? Of course, there's a place for the deeper, more complicated experiences, but if you really want to be able to reach a large audience, and I think just as a designer, it's one of the most powerful skills you can hone, because even if you do want to make a more complicated experience, knowing how to get people to the fun and get the most out of every extra rule or component or nonsense thing that you throw in there is really, really critical.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that there's this also other narrative I want to draw out from this, which is like there's tons of phases, and I don't want to spend all the time on Hearthstone, but during this period, you come out as an outsized personality, I think it's fair to say. And I knew you already, so I'd already seen beats from the Brode. I knew you and who you were. You didn't think I was going to bring that up, did you? Yeah.
I scrubbed all my old raps from the internet before people found them. That Wayback Machine still got my old website, but they don't back up MP3s. So I was successfully removed, because that stuff, was from a different era, man. It was a lot of raps about booty, like it wasn't.
Yeah,
it's not who I am today.
Oh my goodness. So what was the process like of putting yourself out there and becoming, in many ways you were the face of Hearthstone. It's certainly, a major one, if not the one. And how did that role come about? What was that like? What do you, how did you become the Ben Brode everybody knows and loves?
Well, I love community. I love talking to the community. Like when I would go home, I would, to relax, I would go on Twitter and Reddit and stuff and talk about Hearthstone. I loved it. So it's something that I get a lot of energy from. So I did it a lot, and I was really passionate about it. I was living and breathing Hearthstone all the time. I'd go home and play Hearthstone, talk about Hearthstone, and then go to work and work on Hearthstone. So I really enjoyed it. And I got a background in improv and acting. I like being in front of the camera. I like doing these kinds of announcements and stuff like that. So it was something I really loved. It also had a weird effect because, this is true of Steve Jobs. I don't want to compare myself to Steve Jobs, but Elon Musk, these guys who are like public faces of companies, is that they get all the credit for the work that goes on that thousands of people are doing. And they don't deserve anywhere close to that much credit. And the same is true for me. I don't deserve, I was one of 15 original Hearthstone developers. It was not like I wasn't even the game director originally. I wasn't the lead designer. I was like one of the designers on that team. But right. I get a lot of credit, more than I deserve, for my role in Hearthstone, and it was really a team effort. So that part's weird. But it is fun. Well, it's great.
I mean, well, that's the thing. It's so clear that you love it and you have fun doing it. Like that's just, it sums through. I mean, it's I have a similar experience here, right? Like I tend to be the face of my company and do a lot of the public stuff, and I have a team of amazing people that do a lot of the hard work, and so it's important to credit them and acknowledge it. And it's also just, again, it's leaning into your strengths, right? You enjoy this sort of thing. I mean, there's people on my team who are phenomenal designers, and they would hate to be doing interviews. It's like the worst nightmare they could think of. So I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go. Let's talk to press. Let's go hang out. Yeah. Sweet. Okay. So I'm curious if there's other before we leave like the Hearthstone piece, like there's got to be, any other, great lessons. Cause again, I try to, for people out there that want to make their own games and TCGs or get their things, any great lessons or fun stories or anything that you want to share from that time before we start shifting into, let's call it second dinner.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when we were first working on things, there was like a thing that we just used to always ask ourselves, which is, what if we remove this rule? Does the game still have enough depth? It has you can add depth by adding complexity, right? It's just like it's easy to add depth. But we thought, like, is the skill level for this game above what humans can achieve? If it is, you have enough depth. If it's not, and people can actually master this thing, then it doesn't have enough depth yet. We got to add more depth. And our belief was that card games to that point had way more than enough depth, plenty of depth, and that we could reduce complexity and depth, but it would still be like plenty of depth after that kind of removal of rules. And so we would do things like, what about instants? What about like instant responses? If we remove that, we remove a ton of depth. Is there still enough depth? And so we would play with like what we call the basic decks, which is like cards that have no abilities. It was just like Chillwind Yeti and like a bunch of stuff like that. And we'd say, are we having fun with the basic decks? And if we were, we're like, okay, the game is still fun. And then do we still think there's enough like, are we making enough interesting decisions? If so, then we're okay. The fact that we removed this thing or this thing or this thing we're still safe, and the game is more accessible.
Great. Yeah, this is a great rule and principle to live by here. As Ken, if I remove this, is this game still fun and deep enough? And what do I need this thing? If so, get rid of it, or at least All right, I love it. So this is going to be a great now to transition to your new company and your new project. And I'd love to know, because I don't actually know the origin story of how it kind of got started. I saw the big announcements and everything, but what made you decide to you were ready for the next thing? What was that like? Tell me the story of the transition out of Blizzard into Second Dinner.
Well, I kind of surprised myself because I'm not a very I'm not a very risky person. I'm like more of a, like less risk-taking person, I guess. So when the opportunity, like Hamilton's the EP on Hearthstone, CEO of Second Dinner. When we started talking about the future in this way, it just started catching fire within me, man. I don't know. It's just like my life to that point. I had imagined, myself. Again, I'm going to compare myself to giants in the industry, not intentionally, but I imagine myself like Mark Rosewater, who has been doing an incredible job shepherding an incredible game for decades. That's kind of how I imagined myself with Hearthstone. Was I would just kind of work on Hearthstone my whole life, and then when I was faced with the opportunity to do something different, I got really excited. At the time, I was doing a lot of leadership management on Hearthstone. I wasn't creating cards anymore. I wasn't like creating features. I was, helping other people achieve their dreams and doing a lot of, talking with the executives and stuff that wasn't like the most personally satisfying work. And so, I just the opportunity to like get my hands dirty and create a new game, it was a thing that I had been at that time years since I was in that phase, and I got really excited about it. So, Hamilton and I would we couldn't talk about the new thing at work. So we would go, work together all day, and then we would go home and have dinner with the families. And then we would go out together for second dinner and talk about our dreams for, what could be a brand new company.
Great. So we got the origin story for them. So talk to me about those, what do those conversations look like? And then how does it go from second dinner, just eating it to now, all right, we're pitching, we're raising money, we're making a thing really happen.
So, one of the things that Hamilton had done a startup before going to Blizzard, and he learned some lessons from that because it wasn't like I don't think they even got funding. And I think the biggest lesson he learned was make sure you got like a lot of alignment with your founding team, because if you don't, it could go really bad. And so we spent a lot of time talking about like what are our hopes and dreams. How long should we try and get funding for? And if our numbers are different, and I'm like, I'll try for 6 months and I'm bailing out because I need to get some money, and his is like, well, I'll try for 3 years before I'm willing to give up. then at some point there's going to be like a split, right? How are we going to handle that? What does that look like? Who retains, ownership of the assets we've created so far? And so there's like a bunch of stuff there that's like, hairy stuff that's, finances and, like what are your dreams long term? Like, it's like it goes well. What do you want to do then? Like there's a bunch of that stuff that's, I think, important to talk about up front and be really, really clear with each other on. And so we did a lot of that category of stuff, expectation setting, really exposing our fears and dreams to each other. And that helped us, I think, set us up well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's such great advice. And I also, definitely had learned that the hard way when I first taking on investors, right? They have a specific expectations of what they want, right? And if you're bringing in investors that want you to, go big or go home and, put it all in and exit versus build a long time brand that you're going to support and shepherd for many years, right? Like that was a thing I had to figure out with my company, because I'm like, look, I'm not going anywhere. I love making games. I love my team. I'm not planning to go anywhere soon. So I need investors that are on for that ride if they're going to come along and be a part of that. So this is like with your founders even more critical, because you're just going to be in the trenches together all the time. So surfacing hard discussions early and working through those things and thinking about the worst case scenarios and the best case scenarios and how those play out. This is not, by the way, for everyone listening, this is not just startup advice. This is relationship advice. Side note.
The relationship between founders is an important relationship.
Yes, it really is. I mean, you're basically married, like, right? You spend more time with your founder working than you do with your spouse for those first, at least for those first several months to years. Like, that's just how it works. So yeah, this is great. Okay, so you obviously eventually get aligned on this, and you're like, let's do it. Let's take the plunge. Do you give notice to Blizzard on the same day? Do you go trail it out? Like, who are you? Like, talk me through that conversation. Do they try to talk you out of it? Like, I remember my quitting story, so I wanted to hear yours.
Yeah, it was really nice. So they were, I was there for 15 years. Hamilton was there for 10 years. So we had an incredible relationship with all the people there. So they threw us a big party on the way out, and they were really, really nice. I have a lot of respect for the people who were running Blizzard there at the time, and obviously a lot of the people who are still there who I got to work with. It was nice. I cried like a little baby on my last my last day. It was really sweet.
That's great. Okay. So then, I really want to spend tons of time on the specifics of the design, but I'm really interested on this whole process, right? So what is it that you're building? What you're building out front? How much of this have you figured out? How much of this is like your fund? How long before you get funded in this process? Like, what are these early days like?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, the first thing we did was, set up shop in I have this little room above my garage that was originally going to be like a mother-in-law suite, but we didn't end up using it for that. And so we had just a couple desks in here. And actually the first day, we just had couches. We didn't have, our computers didn't arrive yet. So we just sat on the couches and kind of daydreamed about like what kind of games we might want to make. We hadn't come up with any ideas yet, because we didn't, at the time we were working for Blizzard, anything we make at Blizzard is owned by Blizzard. So we just we're really careful about making sure that, we didn't start thinking about any specifics until we'd left. And so we were like, okay, what could we do? What does the future potentially look like? Do we want to make another card game, or do we want to make something else? And there was two really big moments really early on for us. So the first is that while working on Hearthstone, we got to become really, really close with the folks at NetEase, who were our eventual investor. And we worked with them for like a decade. And so when we popped out, they said, hey, look, we'd love to be part of your new thing. We really trust, we had a relationship built on trust over a long time of working together. They really just said, hey, look, you can run the company the way you want to run it. They gave us a ton of freedom and said, hey, here's an investment of $30 million for a minority stake, which was just like really, really super generous and really, really fantastic of them. They just wanted to be a part of something awesome. And so it's like an unbelievable relationship. NetEase is like, I just
realized I need better friends. That's that is, I mean, I got some good friends, and they would come through for a homie. Here, you know what? Here's 30 mil. We trust you. Go run with the ball. That's phenomenal.
They are just the best folks, and they're such like incredible partners. They've just been super, super helpful across the whole thing. Like when COVID hit, they just sent us, like, it was hard to get masks here. They just gave us this massive shipment of medical masks and like a ton of research on the work they'd done to figure out how to work, remotely in an environment where COVID was just popping up. They've just been like super homies. They're the best. They're fantastic.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And look, and obviously this is, on the one sense of joking about, you get this thing, but like, look, building relationships over a decade or more by being a good person to work with, by doing good work, by consistently like showing up. And that is how you make things like this happen. Right. So you set yourself up with this position through a long time of hard work and delivering and putting yourself out there. And so it's the thing, like, this is a 20-year arc, right? In a lot of ways to get this overnight success. Right. And I really like to reemphasize that for people, because it can be discouraging, right? When you're the pizza delivery guy wanting to live your dream and make your own games, it can take a while to get you there, but like it pays off. And so it's awesome. I'm just like, I was so happy when I heard about this, and it's been exciting now to see it all start to come to fruition. It was very exciting for us too, because it happened really fast after we left. It was,
at the time, we had no income. Like, try to figure out if I could make my mortgage payment every month. It's like a little scary, but it worked out really well for us. And then pretty soon after that, so the guy who runs Marvel Games, his name's Jay On. He used to work at Blizzard with Hamilton and I. So when he went over to Marvel to run their games division, he said, "Look, I want to make incredible games. Every Marvel movie that comes out, you're like, oh, I got to see that, because everyone's awesome. You have this expectation the next one's going to be incredible." And he's like, Marvel games should be like that. Every Marvel game that comes out, people should say, oh, a new Marvel game? I got to play it. And so he was looking for partners that would hit that bar, that would make people start to expect greatness from Marvel games. And he signed some incredible deals, like that Spider-Man game on PS4. So good. That was like one of the first deals that he did. And there's been just a lot of great, like the Guardians of the Galaxy game that just came out. It's fantastic. And so he said, hey, look, Hamilton, if you guys start a new company, I'd love to work with you to make like an incredible Marvel mobile game. And so we, from the very beginning, kind of suspected that we might have an opportunity to work with those folks. And we were really, really lucky they took a big chance on us, because, obviously it's our first game as a studio. And they, like, the team he put together is so good. I mentioned before that they're like incredible to work with. They're like so good. The Marvel team there is absolutely like world class. I could not be happier. It feels like we're all one big team, and it's a real collaborative thing, because they're just wonderful.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, man. It's like working hard with great people to solve like interesting problems and make stuff you're really proud of. It's like, that's my recipe for a good life. Like, it's just so critical and so great. So yeah, it's fantastic. And again, that those relationships paid off. So, in so many ways that were unforeseeable back in the day, and then all end up, coming together. Okay, so I could deep dive into all these stories forever, but I want to spend a good amount of time talking about your new game and grilling, because this is a game design podcast. So we're going to get into game design of this thing that you made that I played 12 hours of in one weekend. So let's talk about Marvel Snap. Why don't we because again, for a lot of people, it'll be out now by the time that this airs. So why don't you give a brief synopsis of how the game plays, and then I'm going to pepper you with a million questions.
Sure. Okay. So it's a mobile first game. It plays really good on iOS or Android. There's 3 locations, and your goal is to win 2 out of 3 locations. And you play cards to locations. They cost energy. It's like Hearthstone's mana system. You get 1 new energy each turn. You got to use it or lose it. But you spend your energy to play cards, and you choose which of the 3 locations do I want to play my cards at. Every card has a certain amount of power, and the more power you have at the location, the more you're winning that location. At the end of the game, if you have more power than your opponent at a location, you're winning that location. And again, you got to win 2 out of 3 to win. So it's the key thing here is that you're playing simultaneously. So while I'm deciding what moves I want to make, you're deciding what moves you want to make, and we reveal our choices to each other at the same time. And the combination of these like locations and the simultaneous reveal means you're trying to kind of convince your opponent, okay, I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go to the right, and then your opponent like bites the feint, and they're like, oh no, I thought he was going to go right, he didn't go right, and so you really need to like just sneakily get 2 out of the 3. Deploying your cards perfectly to get, to just edge over your opponent on that last location is a lot of the fun and strategy of the game.
Right.
There's also the snapping mechanic, which is
yes, this is my favorite thing by far. The core tension here is that uncertainty around which of these three locations we're going to play at back and forth, and a lot of the cards lean into it. And so that's where a lot of the strategy comes from. But let's talk about the snap.
Yeah, so this was Hamilton's idea. This is one of the first ideas. In fact, it might be the first actual game design idea for the whole project, because he said, you know what I would love is I would love a strategy game that used the backgammon doubling cube to double down on whether you think you're going to win a return of the game. And I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. It's really simple, and it sounds like it had a ton of depth. And so the first thing we did is we actually played. I just logged into public Hearthstone and I played the game. And Hamilton sat over my shoulder and said, "Okay, would you double this turn?" And I was like, I think I would double. And he's like, "If your opponent doubled, would you concede?" And I was like, "No, I wouldn't concede. I'd stay in." And so we basically played with the snap mechanic just verbally over a game of Hearthstone. And we're like, yo, this is actually really fun. It's like, it adds this really interesting level of bluffing and doubling down. It's really interesting. It's really a really different experience and really simple, but really fun.
Yeah. So this was the thing that got me, like, for sure. So like the play cards to three different zones, have the most power in those zones. Like, I've seen that before. Like, I've seen all of that before, right? Simultaneous play, like, nothing was like, it's cool, it's well executed, but it's like, okay, I've seen it. But the doubling cube is instantly, like, everything is like fun and awesome, because you now as a player, you have a very important thing, right? Because just the difference is, like, you get 1 point for winning this game versus you get or win or lose 1 point. You're at stake is one point versus 2. Okay, that game is twice as important immediately, right? And if your opponent thinks that they're winning and you think you're winning, now it doubles to 4, and there's an automatic last turn moment if you play it all the way to the end of the game. The game goes over 6 turns typically. If you play all the way to the end of the game, then it automatically doubles the value at the end of the round. So you have the option to retreat at any point. And so there's this, if as a strategic player who, the basics of the game, like, maybe they've already, there's not as deep for them. Now all of a sudden it's immediately deep, because you now have to judge at every moment how much you think you're winning, how much you want to stay in it, and that will very much be the biggest factor in your ranking in the long run, because one game could be worth 8 times what another game is worth, and you're way better off running away while it's worth 1.
If you win 30% of your games, but the games you win, you're winning 8 cubes, which is the ranking points in the game. It's how you get higher rank. If you win 8 cubes per win, you're gonna and only lose 1 cube when you lose because you were treated, strategically. Then you're gonna catapult up the ranks. But if you win 70% of your games, but you lose 8 cubes every time you lose and win 1 every time you win, you're moving backwards. It's super important to, like, strategically retreat or bluff or try and get every cube you can at every game.
Yeah, so this is another just great little design insight, right? Because this is where you started, was you took a classic game mechanic that has existed for centuries. I don't know how long backgammon's been around, but forever, and taking it and bringing it forward in a new context. And that is, I think, just like just a great strategy in general for people that want to make designs, right? There's tons of great mechanics out there that just are not, I don't want to play backgammon. I don't find backgammon that fun, but I find TCGs really fun. Okay, cool. Here you go. Now I take the best part of backgammon, add it into a nice little TCG with a cool brand I love. Like, that's a pretty good recipe for success.
We when we were trying to figure out what to do, often what we do is just play other games. And there's something, we're not copying other games, but we're like finding mechanics that we're like, this blended with this other thing creates something totally new.
Yeah. Well, all creativity is theft. Like, let's not, don't kid yourself. Like, if nobody is innovating. It's, you're taking different mechanics from different places, but you're presenting it in a new way, and you're genuinely creating a new experience. Right. So it's not, I think that is exactly the way that everyone designs, whether they want to admit it or not. Like, you're taking other elements and bringing them together in different ways. That's what creativity is. So I think it's great. And I think that one of the interesting choices for that I wanted to dig in on, because again, the card draw and the card play is all stuff we've seen before. The fact that each of the locations has a special ability or effect, and they get revealed one at a time over the first 3 turns, but they're sort of general, like, you don't own them, they're not in your deck, they're not in your opponent's deck, they're sort of these general pool of cards. Talk to me a little bit about that design process and choice, because I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, well, the ramifications of this are actually humongous, because every game is different. So there's about 80 locations, and there's like 3 per game. So you just don't know what it's going to be each game. And card games in general have this effect where you have to like make a lot of content because they get stale over time pretty quickly, right? As I'm playing priest and you're playing mage, and I played you 40 times. Like I'm not solving new problems. I know how this is going to go. I know what cards are important to me. I know what cards are important to you, and I'm just executing, right? I'm not solving anything new. And that's why the designers need to continually release new cards to create new problems to solve in a new meta. And when the locations are totally new and unique each time, it means that even if I'm playing the same deck over and over and over again, the experience I'm having is different every single game. I have new problems to solve. We played against each other a bunch, but never at the raft and the Baxter building and the sewer system. How do I play my deck differently against your deck in this scenario? Every game is totally unique and different with this kind of random seeding of locations to start.
Yeah, and so I think that then that seeds well into this. What looked really interesting to me in terms of the kind of sales model of your game and how it progresses, because it doesn't look like you have traditional booster packs anymore.
That's right.
This game. So maybe talk a little bit about how that works and how you acquire cards and how you progress and because it's clear a lot of thought went into this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know more.
Way more thought went into this than the actual design of the core gameplay. Because we talked about creativity is theft. There's not really any other game like Marvel Snap when it comes to the meta progression. So we look there's less cards. There's only 180 or so cards, and they're not, you can't, if you have a very few number of cards, the way that other games monetize, they let you upgrade the cards. They get more powerful, right? Like Clash Royale does this. As you get more copies, they get stronger, right? But because of the way our game works, we just feel like you can't really do that, right? Like if the numbers are changing, it screws with the balance in a way that's just kind of untenable, and the math gets really hard. So we said, okay, we can't do power progression. That's not an option. And so there's not really any other game that has a small number of cards and doesn't use power progression. We couldn't really think of one. And so we had to come up with a whole new strategy for how to, get players to unlock new cards. None of the other things work.
This is fascinating to me because I am also I'm also just naturally turned off by those games, like the kind of Clash of Clans and those kinds of, or Clash Royale, where they just okay, you've played longer, your cards are just more powerful than mine. Yeah. I could play the exact same card and yours is just better. It takes something away from me as the kind of pure game spirit. I don't care if variance. I want people to win. I want the worst player to win sometimes, but just that you just outbought me and just had better cards always feels like bad. And so the fact that you stayed away from that, it was a bold choice that I respect a lot. And so but as a business, you need to get people to bend, to actually want to play and spend. So how do you solve that?
It's in everyone's best interest, the players and the developers, that it's worth making this game, right? If you
if you don't make money, the game shuts down and nobody gets to play. So
we tried a lot of things, actually. So one of the big inspirations was Pokemon Go. Because Pokemon Go, I think, proved that you can have a game that's entirely focused on collecting and has very little actual gameplay, and it's still incredibly fun. And so we said, okay, how can we create a system where you could make, like in Pokemon Go, you could buy more incubators, you could buy lures and incense, and that's fine because you never meet somebody else who plays Pokemon Go and say, oh, did you just buy all those Pokemon? No, you earned them. You may have spent money to earn them faster, but you had to put in the work to get those Pokemon. And that was kind of a model I felt like could really work for us, which is that, you can get cards faster if you spend some money, but you can't just skip. You can't just get to the end. You can't buy a pack and say, okay, here's all the cards. You got them. You got to work to get the cards. And so that was kind of our imagination. We didn't have a solve for it yet, but that was the kind of platform we were looking forward. How do we make it so you have to work to get the cards, but you can pay to speed it up a little bit?
Okay, great. And so then that it ends up coming through with the UI UX for it is really slick and moves through, but it comes through with a lot of little pieces, right? There's a bunch of different resources. There's a kind of a boost resource for the specific cards. There's resources you use generally. There's a few. Normally it's pretty common to have 2 currencies in a game. You have I think at least 3 or 4. Maybe just unpack that a little bit. How did that design process go? Because I just find it really fascinating.
So we when we first, we went through so many iterations of how do you earn cards. That was the hardest problem we went to solve. We had something that worked a little bit like Warcraft garrisons from the the expansion that had garrisons, where we had like heroes you would level up and then send them on missions, and then they'd bring back cards for you, and you would like spend all your time like leveling up your heroes to go on these missions. We had a sphere grid at one point where you were like slowly making progress over a sphere grid to unlock all the cards. There was something cool about that, but there was also some big problems with it.
And unpack for me a little bit like what this process, because I like the iterative design process is something I reinforce all the time when on the podcast and my book and everything. And like, how are you iterating? Like, walk me through what it's like when you're like, okay, we tried this, we had this idea. You actually like program it. Do you do like you talked about in the Hearthstone story, you were testing this drafting mechanic using folders on the wall.
Yep.
Like, how do you know when you're on the right track? Like, I just love to unpack some of the nuts and bolts of working through. Like, what I identified right away was like the hardest, most interesting part of your game of getting this done right.
Well, the trick is to learn as much as you can as quick as you can. So if you can use paper prototyping to learn a lesson, quickly, because it's really easy to cut up some paper and write some things on a business card or something, then start there. But if you can't, because it's more complicated than you can achieve with paper, then you would code something up or do something in Unity or draw something myself or ask for help to get something done as quick as possible. And then the thing about game design is you cannot tell if a design is good or bad by talking through it. You must play it, and then it's immediately obvious to everybody who's played it if it's good or not. And then you can decide to move forward or go back into the drawing board and retry again.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about these progression trees, in a sense, it takes quite a while to get that feeling, right? Because we're talking about now designing the game around the game in a sense, right? That
yes.
we spent a little time on the heart of the like, what does a match look like with an opponent and why is that interesting? But this is a whole other level of, okay, what is the game of collecting cards and leveling up and the feeling of progression? And that of necessity, you needed to take a certain amount of time to get the feelings right. So how is it literally you're testing it over days or weeks, or are you just accelerating the timetable and kind of gut checking it? Like, what does that feel like?
Yes. So this was one of our biggest kind of learnings on the game. Is we started out just doing like weekly play tests where we would just play all the time ourselves, and we realized we needed help, and so we started doing like friends and family tests where we invite some players in and we would run the test for some number of months. We would learn a lot, but the rev on just like a new, like doing something new and trying something else when it didn't work, it took a long time because it took like months every rev. And so once we built some AIs that were fun enough to play against, we just started filling the pool of matchmaking with AIs, and that let us like have really there's someone to play against all the time. So just like as the designer, we could go in and say, okay, I'm going to pretend like this is a real a new account, and like, how does it feel to collect cards? And I could do that over the course of a week I didn't need to schedule a play test or have a bunch of people, chime in. And that let us increase the pace of iteration much, much faster. And that's where we made, I think, most of the progress towards the model we ended up on is through this kind of AI fueled multiple play tests a day thing.
Got it. So the AI, you have AI opponents available at any time that allows you to go through the emotional experience of playing and completing your quests and moving from seeing what the different progression trees are.
Exactly.
But you did that at the normal pacing. So I would go through, try to feel what it's like hypothetically in a normal first week of play experience. You kept that pacing the same, but you just accelerated it by creating.
We tried the other thing. I actually had like a system where you could like hit a button to skip an hour, so you could see like how timers felt and stuff. And it just didn't. It never gave us the same feelings that doing it at the normal pace did. And so we would just play like the first 3 days over and over and over again, and then sometimes we play the first week or something. But it took real time to do that.
Yeah, and so your primary focus is what does it feel like during this first 3 to 7 days, and then
exactly.
if it felt good there, then you're on the right track.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. Awesome. This is really great to dig into because I think that it just felt really good. I mean, that part to me felt really good and interesting, and I agree with you. I don't think I've seen a game that progresses like this, and it does something that also was kind of interesting. I found. Your progression is like turning your cards into alternate art cards or into frame breaks or 3D cards and that that might not be something you care about as a player, but you do because that's the key to progression also. So you get this like the kind of collector that just wants to see their cards be cool, and then the collector that wants to move up the track, and the progression guy, and all ties into the same system, which most games don't do either, right? There's two different tracks typically. Yep. There's like, oh, I care about pretty cards, and oh no, I want the most powerful thing, or I want to complete the story or whatever. So what? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, we at the very beginning said, look, cosmetics don't sell well in games. It's just not like a thing that most, like there's exceptions, right? Like a lot of people point to Fortnite or League of Legends, but for the vast majority of games, it's like a huge exception. People just don't spend money on cosmetics. So we said, let's if we sell cosmetics, let's have them have a gameplay impact. Let's have it be a thing that actually matters to your gameplay, and then it's not foolish to invest in cosmetics. And so we didn't get there all the way with some categories of cosmetics, at least not yet. But I think it's for this upgrading path, we really thought it was cool to like hook it into the core loop. So the core loop is you play with a card, you get some boosters for that card, you use those boosters to upgrade the card. That gives you collection level. And then all the cards in the game are on the collection level. So if you want more cards, you just got to up your collection level, get new cards, you upgrade those with boosters, you get more collection level, you get some more cards. So it's kind of like a virtuous cycle. But it takes you through the path of upgrading cards, and it gives you some small sub goals, and you feel like you're making progress, and you feel like your cards look, because they look incredible as you upgrade them.
Yeah, definitely. It's a cool thing, and gives you a visual hook as you're moving through. Because I agree, I'm not the kind of person that's going to spend money or time specifically on the cosmetic piece, but I was like, if I can just get it as part of my normal progression, and that feels really good. So I thought that was a really interesting choice. That was really cool. And then the other thing, it seems like everything, the sort of mission progression and these kinds of things, and this stuff has been done before, but there's a degree of like, lots and lots of different little missions and quests and things that you could do, and win games with this card, or play this many 4-cost cards, or do all these things, right? So that seemed to be a pretty deep well of little achievements and little mini goals. Yeah. And so how do you think about those kinds of designs and making something that's like enough stuff for people to do, but not so much that it's overwhelming, and pacing it out over time? And like, how do you think about that piece?
Oh man, that stuff is just, we went through so many iterations on that stuff, because it's you can really easily end up in a space where there's not enough stuff for players to do, and you can also end up in a space where the game's overwhelming. And so some of these systems are designed to make sure that players make a lot of progress, and like hey, if you don't get enough credits to upgrade your cards, you're just not going to make, the game's not fun, right? We need like a certain pace of content. And then we also need something to spend money on, which in this game, you can spend money on getting more credits per day if you want to, so you can move a little faster than the players. So we need to make sure what is the daily amount of credits you can get? What is the amount you could spend? Having a refresh daily mission system allows us to tune those things pretty effectively. It also allows us to be really kind of careful about how often you come back to the game and have no goals because you completed all your missions, right? If we refresh missions every 8 hours, and very likely every time you come to the game, you got something to do, some goals, some short-term goals to achieve, some medium-term goals to achieve, and some long-term goals to achieve. So we just like a lot of like little polish, right? We start out with this, and like, what if you have this many missions? What if they refresh this time? Because it's easy. If we could have the same system, drop the same number of credits, but like every mission gives you half the amount of credits, but you get twice the missions, right? So like, or we have one mission, but it gives you 6 times the amount of credits. So just it's all feel. It's all just kind of gut. Like, do I have the right amount of goals, or should I add more goals?
Okay, well, so then that's another great piece of this, like because as you develop digital games, you have a lot of tools available to you that are not so much in the tabletop gaming world, where you can get lots and lots of metrics, right? You can get lots and lots of data, but you just you made the comments like it's all gut here.
Yeah, how do you hard to get data on right. Is this fun? Especially because you can get data on retention and stuff, right? Like, are players sticking around, right? They like the game, but like, is it because of the mission refresh time? like getting specific information on like something like this is really hard to do effectively. You can do A/B tests and stuff to try and, but like, you can't A/B test an audience that doesn't exist. You've got to start, with some hypothesis and like, just give it a shot. And it comes down to gut at the beginning.
So what? Yeah. So then, you haven't gotten into this phase as we're having this conversation, but you will be when people are listening to it. So what does that process look like once you're live, right? What is it? You obviously went through this with Hearthstone. So, how much does it shift from, okay, it's just got to be gut because I don't have an audience, so I got to figure out what's fun, to the, okay, no, we're going to, on day 2, we're starting A/B testing. On day, here's this metric is the target we're looking for. Like, how much of that changes? How much of that is still just going to be gut? Like, what's running a live game look like? And, what pace of change does that come with? How much do you have to drop new content in this system where you've designed? Like, all this stuff's pretty fascinating. You can take any piece of that you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna actually have, I think, the fastest pace of content of any trading card game, which is that we're gonna release a new location every week for, we have a ton of locations in the hopper basically, and we're gonna release a new card every week at some point, if, once we can figure out how we're gonna drop new cards. But we want to have that's really fast. It's not, most games have like an expansion every 3 or 4 months, and so we're trying to have stuff come out all the time. I think it's really important to have just a lot of new content. It shouldn't be overwhelming because it's only 1 card a week, and it's still only 52 cards a year if you do a card every week.
Right. So it's way less content than almost every TCG in aggregate, but it's way faster pace of new stuff getting thrown into the game.
Exactly.
So that is fascinating.
It should feel constantly fresh and exciting is the idea. And when it comes to making decisions on like what do we do next, and what's working, what's not working, we are going to use a lot of data to refine. So we have a lot of information about, like, where do people fall out of our tutorial, right? We don't call it, it's like the introductory missions or whatever. So like, people are coming into the game and they're like, oh, okay, I played through 6 turns, then I'm like, this is not for me, I'm out of here. And so if we can use data to determine like, hey, there's some players who would really love Marvel Snap, but there's like a confusing moment in our introductory mission, like data helps us realize that and then fix that and make it no longer confusing. So players aren't bouncing off that turn in the introductory missions. But at the for things that are harder to quantify in data, we use a combination of things. We use our own gut, which is a very powerful tool. It's important to listen to your gut. We use data, and we use player feedback. Right? There's once the game goes live, people are talking a lot about what they hate about the game, what they love about the game.
People love to talk about what they hate about the games.
Yeah, right. Yeah, more what they hate. Yeah. But that's a really important thing, and you don't always get the exact solution from players. Sometimes you do, but trying to figure out like where is this coming from, what are the solutions that we can employ, and using data to help inform what are the most important pieces of feedback that we're hearing from players, and helping drive solutions as well is an important thing.
Yeah, no, there's a Neil Gaiman quote that I say on the podcast all the time. It's one of my favorite quotes from my favorite author, and he's talking about writing, but he's just said the same applies to game design. So, if your reader tells you that there's something wrong in your story, they're always right. If they tell you how to fix it, they're pretty much always wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And so that if you get the feedback, not that one person complains about one thing, but if you get consistent feedback from a lot of people that there's a problem, there's definitely a problem. And the job of a game designer is to figure out how to fix it. Right? You have to find a way to bring that solution forward, even though the specifics that your audience is going to tell you to do will often be the thing that destroys your game if you actually gave them everything they wanted. But it's awesome, man. I mean, I could dive probably for another hour or two into each of these pieces, but I want to. It's just such a fun process, and like it's the thing I love about a lot of the thing that's run through this whole chat about really boiling things down to the simplest essence of what's fun. And I think that came through in Hearthstone relative to anything that came before it. I think Marvel Snap, I would say, is way simpler than Hearthstone and has that same, that is going for that same thing. Like how do I get these interesting decisions compressed together in a way that feels fun, that wants me to keep coming back? And it's really, I think you did a great job. My hours played speaks to that anyway. So
it's kind of wild. Like, it was hard to believe that we got like a satisfying collectible card game experience in, like, our games average 3 minutes. And it's like, if you haven't played Marvel Snap, it's hard to imagine what that actually feels like, but it's pretty wild. It's not something I thought we would be able to do. And with a game this simple, it's a surprise to have
very, very light, accessible. Yeah. Somewhere between like what you would expect from a card battler and a real TCG, like a full TCG. And it's like this interesting interplay that I think you found a great place to land. And so it's like, it's just, I always just think about the different kinds of audiences that you want to target, right? Who is it you're going for with these games? And so do you have that, like, what's your kind of persona of the people that you think are like going to love this the most?
It's so interesting. People ask me this question all the time, and it's so antithetical to the way I think about game design, because I feel like when people talk about what audiences they're like going after, it's like the way to never create new audiences. Because Hearthstone, if we had said like we're going after the card game audience, Hearthstone would have been much smaller, right? There was no it massively grew the card game audience. The audience was, I don't know, a brand new audience that doesn't exist yet. And so when I think about the audience for Marvel Snap, I think people who've never tried a card game before, people who maybe Marvel Snap will be their very first card game or their first video game. And our goal is to make something that is both incredibly accessible to people who haven't tried this kind of game before, but also super fun, even people who are hardcore into card games, and trying to achieve both at the same time.
All right. Well, that's a great and ambitious answer. So let's dive a little bit into user acquisition then, because that's the keys, right? You're saying one thing to say, okay, I know I'm going to take all those old Hearthstone players, bring them over to my new game, right? It's another thing to say, I'm going to bring people that would never think to try a game like this and bring them in. How do you do that?
Well, a big part of it is visuals. So, I didn't know what Twitch was when I was working on Hearthstone, right? It's just like came out of nowhere for me. It was not a thing I was aware of. But we did talk a lot about the over-the-shoulder appeal of Hearthstone. Because we knew that people are just like, the impression for a lot of folks was card games aren't for me. They're too complicated. They take too long. And so we said, if we need to subvert expectations. When you see Hearthstone, you just think, what is that? That's not like anything I've seen before. And so, for Marvel Snap, really the same thing. We made a game that I think looks absolutely stunning. The cards are unparalleled. They look just like, they have this cool 3D effect that works with your phone's gyroscope. It's just like, it's wonderful. And, I think that hopefully will encourage people who have been put off by other card games to give this game a try. But I think, if we'd skimped on visuals or something, I think it'd be much harder for us to go big here.
Got it. Yeah, just so drawing people in with something that looks appealing. Obviously, the Marvel license does a lot of work here too, right?
Huge.
People are going to click on a Marvel thing much faster than they will on something else. So there's a lot. Yeah, you're well positioned to bring people in that sense. And I think it's another thing for designers. Just they underestimate a lot of times how much, because as a game designer, you can often just be in the pure mechanics of the game and the interesting decisions that you're making. But the visuals matter, the little effects matter. Like, as we build digital games, like how much you invest in the kinds of animations and the flow and making things feel like intuitive, it makes the game better. It makes the whole experience better.
Way better. Animations and VFX. Our VFX team is so talented, and it really does make the game feel simpler, because you don't I don't know. You've had the experience of playing a card game that has no visuals, and you just have to like understand every card and exactly what it's doing. But when you play the card and you see the fireball, come out of the card and hit the other card, and then it gets destroyed, it's so much easier to understand both the fantasy of what's happening and the actual like rules of what's occurring in the game.
Yeah. Like I'll take an example from your game, actually. So like, the Mr. Fantastic has an ability that gives a bonus to the adjacent lanes. And when you play it, his arms stretch out and like punch the other lanes to increase the numbers. Yep. And it's like, okay, you now like it tells the story for you in a way that you could have told it in your head before. And right, good design does that on the cards, but the visuals and the animation really does a ton of the work. So it's really cool. Okay, man. I know I could keep going on for a while, but we're running out of time. So I want to give you a chance. So we've already talked plenty about the cool new game, and they could download it on the app stores, Google Play and iOS app. There's got to be fun places they can come see you talk and say things. So where should we direct people if they want to see more Ben Brode? They've not gotten enough Ben Brode.
Well, I'm on Twitter most. You can find me on Twitter at @bbrode. I also have a YouTube channel where I have some silly raps that are more modern that are.
I shouldn't tell everybody I downloaded all the old beats from the Brode now, huh? What do you think I could get? What do you think I could get for those? Oh my God. Okay, Ben, I'm so glad that we did this and you came on. I think this is the most I've laughed in any of my podcasts. And it just reminded me how much I enjoyed working with you and enjoyed having you as a friend. And so I'm going to say next time, let's get together and have that WoW minis battle.
Yeah, dude.
I think it's long overdue. Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you want to support the podcast, please rate, comment, and share on your favorite podcast platforms, such as iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever device you're listening on. Listener reviews and shares make a huge difference and help us grow this community and will allow me to bring more amazing guests and insights to you. I've taken the insights from these interviews along with my 20 years of experience in the game industry and compressed it all into a book with the same title as this podcast, Think Like a Game Designer. In it, I give step-by-step instructions on how to apply the lessons from these great designers and bring your own games to life. If you think you might be interested, you can check out the book at thinklikeagamedesigner.com or wherever fine books are sold.